What's up, people? It is Mental Health Mon-TuesDAY with a spiritual twist, brought to you by your girl, Demetra Williams Pitts. And today's episode is Low Self-Esteem, Part 2. Let's get this party started. And which one of these beautiful people have low self-esteem? Can you tell by just looking at them? Okay, last week we covered a lot of information, and here's a brief overview. We talked about what is low self-esteem. We had definitions of confidence, arrogance, insecurity, and humility. Causes of low self-esteem. Review of a Facebook sample that may cause low self-esteem. The worst effect of low self-esteem, meaning suicide, and the statistics. Other causes that may promote low self-esteem. How you could be an abuser causing low self-esteem, signs of low self-esteem, the impact of low self-esteem, and tips to help if you may have low self-esteem. Let's move on. And in this week's episode, we're going to start out with a scripture reference coming from 1 Samuel 16th chapter and 7b as the verse. That would be the B clause of the verse, which says, "The Lord does not see as man does." Let me say that again. "The Lord does not see as man does. For man sees the outward appearance, but the Lord sees the heart." And the heart meaning the inner man, the mind, and the will. Let's talk about perception and how it plays a huge role. The process or result of becoming aware of objects, relationships, and events by means of the senses, which include such activities as recognizing, observing, and discriminating. These activities enables organisms to organize and interpret the stimuli received into meaningful knowledge and to act in a coordinated manner. Now, perception, while our sensory receptors are constantly collecting information from the environment, it is ultimately how we interpret that information that affects how we interact with the world. Perception refers to the way sensory information is organized, interpreted, and consciously experienced. Perception involves both bottom up and top down processing. Bottom up processing refers to the fact that perceptions are built from sensory input. On the other hand, how we interpret those sensations is influenced by our available knowledge, our experiences, and our thoughts. This is called top-down processing. One way to think of this concept is that sensation is a physical process, whereas perception is psychological. For example, upon walking into a kitchen and smelling the scent of baking cinnamon rolls, the sensation is the scent receptors detecting the odor of cinnamon. But the perception may be, this smells like bread grandma used to bake when the family gathered for holidays. Furthermore, our perceptions can also be affected by our beliefs, values, prejudices, expectations, and life experiences. Seeing something is not the same thing as making sense of what you see, which is depicted right here in this example. Why is it that our senses are so easily fooled? You will come to see how our perceptions are not infallible, and they can be influenced by bias, prejudice, and other factors. What we see in the realm of the mind, not the eye. If influenced, you can influence expectations. What you see is just part of your perceptual set, which is the psychological factors that determine how you perceive your environment. Sometimes seeing is believing, but perceptual set theory teaches us that believing is also seeing. There's also context, which influences perception. Then there's culture, emotions, and motivations. Most time, our perceptual set can lead to reasonable conclusions. However, sets can also be misleading and very harmful, the basis of tons of entertaining optical illusions. Here are three factors that influence our perception: the person being perceived, the particular situation, the perceiver. When taken together, these influences are the dimensions of the environment in which we view other people. Perception refers to how we interpret stimuli, such as people, things, or events. Our perception is important to recognize because it is the driving force behind our reaction to things. Hereditary, needs, peer group, interests, and expectations all influence our perception. How do we develop perception? Knowing oneself accurately. One of the most powerful ways to minimize perceptual distortions is to know yourself. Get to know your personality, your core values, your body. Journal. Identify your strengths and weaknesses. Have a life vision and mission. Question your automatic thoughts regularly. Empathize with others. Have a positive attitude. Postpone impression formulation, which is the process by which we form all overall impressions of someone's character and abilities based on available information about their traits and behavior. For example, a new employee in our office shows up on her first or his first day at work in a messy, wrinkled outfit. We may judge them negatively and expect them to work as sloppy as they look. Initial impressions are not always accurate, though. If the employee consistently does good work, we may start to view her differently or him differently. Also, communicating openly, comparing one's perceptions with that of others, introducing diversity management programs. Now, our past experiences shape what we see more than what we are looking at right now. Let me say that again. Our past experiences shape what we see more than what we are looking at right now. This theory is what we recognize is influenced by more past experiences than by newly arriving sensory input from our eyes. It is noted that this idea becomes more important as evidence mounts that hallucinations suffered by patients with post-traumatic stress disorder or schizophrenia occur when stored representations of past images overwhelm what they are looking at presently. Another way to look at this is to look at things from an objective point of view, meaning not influenced by personal feelings or opinions in considering and representing facts, versus looking at things subjectively, which is based on or influenced by personal feelings, taste, and opinions. And lastly, on the topic of perception, here's a depiction of perception versus reality. Perception says it is how a person sees something. Reality says it is the truth and how things exist. Perception says varies from person to person, but reality says doesn't depend on people. Perception says outcome of one's knowledge, attitudes, and belief. But reality says it is not affected by these. Perception says it can be wrong or right. Reality says it is always right. Perception says it can be biased. Reality says can't said or be biased or unbiased. It just is what it is. Perception says can be negative or positive. Reality says it can't be described as positive or negative. Perception says it is person's choice. Reality says it is not a choice. It is. Now, here's how insecurity plays a role in low self esteem. Insecurity itself is a feeling of inadequacy, lack of self confidence, and inability to cope, accomplished by general uncertainty and anxiety about one's goals, abilities, or relationship with others. Keep in mind, low self esteem can encompass a range of factors such as your sense of identity, your self confidence, feelings of competence, and feelings of even belonging. Here are some signs of insecurity. The insecure person tries to make you feel insecure yourself. When you start to question your own self worth, it is typically around a specific person or type of person. Is that individual always broadcasting his or her strengths? Do you don't feel insecure in general, but only around certain people? It's likely they're projecting their insecurities onto you. The insecure person needs to showcase his or her accomplishments. You don't necessarily have to feel insecure around someone to conclude that inferiority is at the heart of their behavior. People who are constantly bragging about their great lifestyle, their elite education, or their fantastic children may very well be doing so to convince themselves that they really do have worth. The insecure person drops the humble brag far too often. The humble brag is a brag disguised as a self derogatory statement. You've all seen these on Facebook, as when an acquaintance complains about all the travel she has to take due to the importance of her job, or all the time he has to spend watching his kids play. And by the way, win hockey games. The Facebook gloat is a bold faced brag, which is easier to spot, but may very well have the same roots. The insecure person frequently complains that things aren't good enough. People high in inferiority like to show what high standards they have. You may label them as snobs, but as much as you realize they're putting on an act, it may be hard to shake the feeling that they really are better than you. What they're trying to do, you may rightly suspect, is to proclaim their high standards as a way of asserting that not only are they better than everyone else, but that they hold themselves to a more rigorous set of self assessment criteria. Now, other things that you may see in people who are insecure: criticizing others, never saying no. That's a big one, because never saying no can refer to anything and anybody. It could be within a relationship, within the family, your parents. It could be your significant other. It could be someone in authority, but you never say no because you have given them the power to make you feel secure about your own self. And so you constantly try to please them instead of actually pleasing yourself and building up confidence in what it is that you desire to do in your own life. You ask for reassurance a lot. the passive aggressive conversation, and just excessively positive about everything that goes on in life. That's not even realistic. Let's talk about ego. The other day I saw a post and I thought that it was absolutely profound. And it states, your ego will make you loyal to a mistake. Oh my God, that is so true. But here are two things from psychology. The word being egoism, which is a personality characteristic marked by selfishness and behavior based on self interest with disregard for the needs of others. The other word is egotism, which is excessive conceit or a preoccupation with one's own importance. Everything that exists in this universe is deeply reliant on the existence of everything else. We only need to reflect on our own body to see that it depends on trees, animals, water, wind, and other people around us, etc. For example, we each breathe in part of everybody else's out breath, and each time we go to the toilet, our contribution is processed by nature in a manner that enables it to create and sustain new life. Self-reflecting on just how much our ego governs our choices, thoughts, and behaviors is definitely worthwhile and can help us understand more about how the mind works and how we construct beliefs about ourselves and the world around us. Such self-reflection should also help us avoid the trap of getting absorbed with our own importance or of making short sighted choices that appear to advance our own agenda but are ultimately detrimental to the well being of this entire planet. If we fail to embrace the fact that we are profoundly interconnected with everything else, our world becomes small and insular. Having a big ego is not conducive to fostering wisdom or personal growth, nor is it conducive to being compassionate or accepting of others. For the most part, overall, I've been talking in general about both male and female as it relates to low self esteem. But now I'm going to switch and I'm going to talk specifically about men. What gives men confidence? Relationships, status, cultural values, such as those placed upon how we look or how they look, along with how their bodies work, all underpin their confidence. It seems that when it comes to being insecure and compensating for it by promoting an image of competence and superiority, men and women are equally predisposed. Men and women also did not differ significantly on the measure of how vain, self absorbed, and image conscious some individuals can be. Significant differences did emerge between men and women on two key dimensions of the non neurotic type of narcissism, with men trending to be slightly more inclined than women to harbor feelings of entitlement and therefore to be predisposed to exploitive in their interpersonal relationships and to be more inclined than women to crave power and to assertively strive for social position and the leadership role. Watch out for those pastors. What causes men to have a lack of confidence or low self-esteem? A change in status if they lose a job, for example, or anxiety around their body not working the way they want it to can seriously affect self-esteem. For men, a crisis in confidence may be compounded by a reluctance to deal with emotional issues in the way women do, by airing, sharing, and confronting issues full on, not what men like to do. Central to gender role stereotypes is the need to fit in and measure up, explains Dr. Gary Wood, social psychologist and the author of The Psychology of Gender. For men, the expectations are of one up manship, he adds. The need to be superior to others, the need to be self reliant and dependent, and the need to be more powerful than others. There's an added pressure on men to deny and suppress anything deemed feminine or infinite. Again, the stereotyping of how men are supposed to be. Big boys don't cry. They sure as hell don't talk about it. For some, to do so makes them less of a man. A 2016 study of more than 100,000 men highlighted how male self confidence is affected by body image. Disturbingly, fewer than half of the men surveyed were satisfied with their body. This dissatisfaction can cause, was dissatisfied with their body. The dissatisfaction can cause low self esteem, anxiety, and depression, whether it's media images of perfection or the filtered lives portrayed on social media. Envy can have a corrosive effect. If the comparisons are favorable, then they're good. If they're unfavorable, then they're bad, says Dr. Wood. So instead of comparing ourselves with others, it's healthier to focus on our own personal best. The masculine gender role also impacts a man's sex lives with the pressure with the pressure to perform. Sexual encounters are described by some as conquests and a validation of male power. So when men experience erectile problems, it can hit right at the core of what it means to be a man. Research shows that men who experience ED report a reduction in their self-esteem, says Dr. Glisbick. I'll spell his name Glsthorpe, or Glesthorpe. It's because sexual performance and the ability to satisfy your partner sexually are important contributions to self-esteem. They specifically impact on close relationships and confidence in one's own physical health. Men. The effects and signs of low self-esteem in men. Not everyone is able to love themselves in a way they should. Low self-esteem is often a result of abuse, neglect, or mental illness that has not been properly addressed. However, here are some of those signs and effect. They may not be able to handle negative criticism. Negative criticism will often be met with hostility and anger. A man with low self esteem will often take any negative criticism as a personal attack, whether it is or not. They may be clingy, emotionally needy, or insecure. A man with low self esteem often needs a lot of reassurance that they are worthy of being loved because they do not feel as though they contribute to the relationship matters as much as their partner. The bottom line of all of this is low self esteem and insecurity are extremely dangerous. If any of the things listed in the presentation caused you to cringe, question your behaviors, or made you angry, perhaps you should evaluate what's really going on with yourself. They may need constant validation about their looks or abilities. Overcompensating by attempting to perfect one's looks or abilities may point to low self esteem. A person with low self esteem may need other people to see how good and perfect they appear and validate it so they can tell themselves that they have worth and value. The problem is it's mostly superficial and the resulting positive feeling doesn't last. They may brag about the things they've done, material possessions they own, or engage in acts of one upmanship. Men who are secure with good self-esteem generally don't need to make themselves feel larger than the people around them. Those with low self-esteem may point to their material possessions as proof of their accomplishments and self-worth. It may be possessive or jealous of other people receiving attention in a relationship. This manifests as things like constant texting while you're apart, messaging when on a night out, and the need for constant check ins. They may be jealous of friendships and relationships you have with other people, including other family members. They may demand you tell them where you are going at all times and what you're doing. Again, some interest is okay, but when it is invasive and approaches levels of micromanagement, it may be cause for concern. They may hide behind self-depreciating humor and deflect compliments. Self-depreciating humor is trendy now. It also serves as a convenient shield to downplay and deflect any kind of compliments or positive reinforcement that may be given. Men with low self-esteem may seek to turn any positive statements about themselves into a joke, brush them off, or minimize them. They may use humor to lessen the impact or not accept a compliment because they don't feel they're worthy of those positive words. Self-depreciating humor can be fun in small doses, but it's also a convenient mask to keep other people from looking too close or dismissing any kind of positive affirming words. Quote, self-esteem has nothing to do with what we have, how we look, or what we do, says Stevenson. It's linked to who we feel we are at depth and whether we have been taught and or shown implicitly or explicitly that we are worthy. Dr. Meg Arnold. Here are just a few signs of how low self-esteem uh, can affect relationships. Low self-esteem can distort your perception of your partner. According to research in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, in the study, researchers asked more than 5 men and women to complete questionnaires about their self-esteem and then asked them how threatened they felt by their partner's flaws. Those with low self-esteem were not only more threatened by their partner's imperfections, but they were also more likely to view their relationship in black and white terms as all good or all bad. Having that kind of polarized view of your partner can be tough on the relationship, says Stephen Graham, PhD, lead author of the study and associate professor of psychology at the New College of Florida in Sarasota. If my views of you are changing very quickly, thinking very positively about you 1 minute and negatively the next, that could make the other person feel insecure, he explains. Predictability in a relationship is crucial, he adds. It's been found to be a key indicator of the quality of intimacy shared by a couple. In addition to impacting your perception of your partner, having low self-esteem can also make you anxious about your relationship in general. You may be afraid that your partner will leave you, or you panic over other things that others wouldn't think twice about, says Heidi Rigo, PhD, a social psychologist and assistant professor of psychology at California State University in Los Angeles. This can lead to panic attacks or extreme jealousy. Then there's low self-esteem that affects us physically. Low self-esteem can influence the way we unconsciously present ourselves, that is, in our body language. Certain people with low self-esteem might have manifestations in their body of slouching and softer voices. However, there might be those who have an aggressive guard to protect themselves or prove to themselves around other people that they are valued or worthy. says a therapist in the alternative story. Slouching can cause an array of health problems, ranging from fatigue to weakened muscles. Fatigue is also a side effect of poor self esteem. People with low self esteem may utilize a significant portion of their energy to internalize feelings of anger, sadness, and guilt at themselves. Be aware, understanding, and dealing with these intense and heavy emotions consumes the emotional energy of the person. Energy is a limited resource that each person has, and when one spends emotional energy to process and understand overwhelming emotions, they might not have as much energy to do other tasks. People with low self esteem are also at risk for body dysmorphic disorder, which there's an example to your left. And that causes one to keep thinking about the flaws and perceived defects in their appearance, which can elevate into suicidal or self harming tendencies. There's also a significant link between low self esteem and eating disorders, which are psychiatric disorders that cause the body to waste away due to dietary restriction and overexertion. Low self esteem may also be linked to developing unhealthy habits like smoking and drinking, possibly developing substance abuse through the link, though the link is not direct. There are various factors that contribute to substance abuse: a person's support system, social relationships, emotional health, situational factors, genetic predispositions, and resources to cope with all of these factors contributes to a person being drawn into substance abuse. It is difficult to narrow down one factor that leads to substance abuse or use, as in most situations, it is a combination. The ideal way to overcome low self-worth and esteem would be to seek counseling or cognitive behavioral therapy. Self-esteem is very often determined by others' valuation of the self, which primarily defines one's own understanding of themselves. Here are some additional ways to combat low self esteem. Identify troubling conditions and situations. Take a moment to think about certain conditions and situations in your life that seem to always deflate your self esteem. It could be giving a work presentation, dealing with a difficult family member or friend, or facing a life changing event like a job loss or a move. Become aware of your thoughts and beliefs. After you've identified the times in your life where you have felt low self esteem, evaluate your thoughts about them. How are you interpreting what happened? These thoughts could either be positive, negative, or neutral. They can be based on facts or irrational and false ideas. If you take a moment to notice what you are thinking, you can begin to understand whether or not your reactions to what has happened are appropriate or useful. Challenge negative or inaccurate thoughts. It is important to ask yourself whether your thoughts are consistent with facts and logic. Let me read that line again. It is important to ask yourself whether your thoughts are consistent with facts or logic. There could be another explanation for a situation that is truer than your interpretation. Sometimes it is hard to break away from long held beliefs that have become a part of your reality. We're kind of going back to perception here. Understand that it can take time and patience to overcome any negative preconceived notions towards your life that you've built up. Adjust your mindset. You've been able to identify the times where you felt a blow to your self esteem. You become self aware about how and why you have the thoughts and feelings toward those particular events. Now you can take a step back and analyze those thoughts and emotions. You now have the power to change your thought patterns to raise your self esteem. Remember to think and feel hopeful statements. Focus on the positive aspects of all situations and not be afraid to relabel upsetting thoughts. And most importantly, don't hesitate to forgive yourself and others. No one is perfect and everyone makes mistakes. It doesn't make you a bad person. It just makes you human. If you are serious about boosting your self esteem and understanding the difference between confidence, arrogance, insecurity, humility, biased perception, and egotism, and how they all relate, please take the opportunity to either view part one or go above and look at the beginning of part two that gives some definitions and how all of these things combined make up your self esteem. All right, this concludes this edition of Mental Health Mon-TuesDAY with a spiritual twist. Compliments of or some of the sources were Lumen Learning, Psychology Today, MV Organizing, WebMD, the SWATO, JED Foundation, Very Well Mind, National Institute of Mental Health, Centers for Disease Control, Scroll.NMPR, and of course, God's Word. Remember, you are valuable. Say to yourself, I am valuable. Remember, your mental health affects your physical health. Let's make it a priority to have a happy, healthy, functioning mind. Mind your thoughts. Ahala.